Hello, my fellow Americans. It is the 31st of January, 2025, and this is A Quiet Rage. So, by now, everyone surely must be aware of the tragic air accident between an Army Black Hawk helicopter and a civilian airliner that crashed into each other and then fell into the Potomac River. I wasn't planning on doing an episode this week. I had a work thing yesterday that cut into my normal time, but this kept... turn on the radio and, the story is there. So it kept sitting in the back of my mind, and I had heard that our president, the president of these United States, had made a statement and briefly taken some questions. So I went to the YouTube channel for CSPAN so that I could watch it without any anything scrolling along the bottom from one side or the other. I love that about C-SPAN. They don't take a side. They just present it to you as it is. I watched it through to get my initial reaction, and then I watched it a second time to take some notes. The C-SPAN video that I watched, it starts kind of as the president is in the middle of asking for everyone to observe a moment of silence right after he walked in the room. At a minute 45, he says, "As one nation we grieve," and certainly that's true. This was a terrible, terrible thing. I mean, I can't imagine what the final moments for those people was like. It must have been awful. And I can't imagine the agony that their families and their friends and their coaches and their teachers feel. At 2 minutes, 55 seconds, our president said, "At moments like these, our differences as Americans fade to bonds of affection and loyalty." It took him 2 whole minutes before he started blaming other people. At 4:55, he starts talking about how the standards during the Obama administration were not good. And then later at 10 minutes and 20 seconds, he references the outgoing Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. He almost mispronounces his name. And in a press conference, in a statement where he's supposed to be, acting as healer in chief, bringing us together and reminding us what it is that makes us great as Americans when we bond together in times of trial. He just can't help himself. He says on live television that Pete Buttigieg was a terrible mayor, ran his city into the ground, was terrible as a Secretary of Transportation. He just had a good line of bullshit. Actual quote from our president. "As we grieve as one nation." He's throwing barbs at the outgoing administration. And then he rambles on about helicopters and airplanes, proving that he knows fuck all about either of them. It struck me that he said at one point during his statement, and then later when somebody questioned him about, do you really think DEI caused this? He mentioned Common sense. Common sense should have stopped a disaster like this. But he also said multiple times how geniuses need to be air traffic controllers. Now, don't get me wrong. I am absolutely all for air traffic controllers being qualified people that are that are good at their job. I mean, baseline, you need to be good at your job to be an air traffic controller. What I came away from this statement, this rambling stupidity, was just emphasizing once again that this man, our president, has a complete lack of empathy. In a moment, as I said, when he's supposed to be healer in chief, bringing us together, reminding us of our better angels, he can't help but be driven by his own demons and calling people names. Well, he didn't call anybody names, but disparaging other people. Just for the record, so at one point he also referenced, actually a couple points. He referenced an article. Excuse me while I look at my screen over here. References an article that that says that hiring practices were substandard at the FAA. It was published in the New York Post on January 14th of last year, not this year, a minor detail that he couldn't get right. And it's it's telling that he didn't bother, well, he or nobody on his staff bothered to look into it, because in fact the language that it uses goes back to and was in use on the website when he was president last. I'll link an article that is from a local Washington NBC News channel that is actually fact checking, which is what I'm getting all of this from. In particular, he mentioned that it was the FAA's policy to hire people with certain targeted disabilities, hearing loss, hearing or sight impairment, loss of extremities, etc., and psychiatric disabilities. It's worth noting that the FAA in 2019 and 2020, the program specifically emphasized that people with disabilities would not be hired for jobs for which they aren't capable. So he claims that these people with intellectual disabilities and deaf and blind people, hearing impaired and seeing impaired people, are going to be air traffic controllers. No, obviously, if you're legally blind, you can't be an air traffic controller. That doesn't make any sense. The agency's annual goal for hiring people with targeted disabilities has generally been in the vicinity of 2%. Every organization, every office, every company needs people that work in administration, people that work in the mailroom, people that don't do the big thing that the company does. So for the president, our president, to imply that his two predecessors as president thought it was okay for people with blindness, deafness, or psychopaths is the implication. At least that's what I took from it. Take from it what you will. To imply that people who are not actually physically capable or truly qualified to be air traffic controllers were just allowed in willy-nilly, that's irresponsible at best. It's an outright lie, and it goes against common sense. But, oh, you know, I never in my life have I wanted to hear the platitudes that we normally get from people in positions of authority and such than I did during watching that press conference, that statement twice. And wouldn't it be great too if we could have a president who said we don't comment on ongoing investigations? Wouldn't that be fucking fantastic? Instead, this moron decides to post on Truth Social let me bring it up. I got it over here. The airplane was on a perfect and routine line of approach to the airport. The helicopter was going straight at the airplane for an extended period of time, according to him. It is a clear night. The lights on the plane are blazing, blah, blah, blah. Why didn't the control tower tell the helicopter what to do? This is a bad situation that looks like it could have been prevented. We saw in the immediate aftermath of the Francis Scott Key Bridge collision in Baltimore Harbor was that last year? Recently. We saw how right-wing nutjobs immediately, conspiracy theories started flying back and forth that this was an attack. This is one of the big reasons why, as an official, as a person in authority, when you get up to make a statement and you don't know all the facts, you say, we're not going to comment on this on what is clearly an ongoing investigation, except to say that our hearts go out to those who are affected. I've never flown a helicopter. I've never flown an airplane. I've flown in Army helicopters, well, Navy helicopters, and I've flown in jets. I've never been an air traffic controller. I was a sonar tech for 20 years in the Navy and stood on deployment in harm's way on 2 deployments, multiple missions, stood sonar supervisor, which I would say probably, in my opinion, probably has some similarities to air traffic control. Because you're managing a changing picture, multiple objects moving in 3-dimensional space. And most of the time, things are pretty chill. You've got a transit lane going that way, a merchant transit lane going that way, and you got fishermen over here, and you know where the ports are, you know what's going on. But every now and again, somebody departs the pattern and does something weird, and it throws everything into a moderate amount of chaos, and you have to manage it. And it takes a clear head and a calm demeanor to get through it. Taking a submarine from down deep up to periscope depth so we can put our periscope and our antennas up and communicate with the outside world is definitely the most dangerous thing we do on a routine basis as a submarine. We preach that to the control room party, to the sonar, to the contact management party, and to the guys driving the ship, the sailors driving the ship. It's probably the closest thing to landing an airplane, honestly, because bringing a ship into port we have tugs that come alongside. It's not the same. So coming up to periscope depth from down deep is probably the closest thing to landing a helicopter or an airplane that there could be, because you're up. Airplanes are up there in their own. They've got their lanes. They've got their bubbles. I don't know how exactly airspace management works for helicopters, but I know commercial jets, they've got their vectors. You're at 30,000 feet going north. You're at 35,000 feet going west. You have separation. I know that much. But when everybody's coming down to the same spot, that is when things are the most dangerous. That is when you have the most opportunities for things to go wrong. I would never presume to comment any further than I just have about what it's like flying a helicopter low over in the vicinity of an airport or over a populated area. I would never presume to comment any more than I just have about what it's like trying to land an airplane in a busy airport at night. I just wish our president would have the same fucking decency. But apparently that's too much to ask. So what can we do? I've said I want to try and end each of these videos with a little something that we can do. That was the original goal of this channel, was how can we be anti-fascism? How can we resist these MAGA Trump idiots and their dear leader? And I think honestly, watching C-SPAN and or C-SPAN YouTube videos is actually a good way to do it. I've mentioned before we should try and avoid clickbait, and that's definitely still true. But I do think it's still important that we stay informed about what's going on. Well, C-SPAN is wonderful because there is no slant whatsoever. They have guests come on, and they show clips. They show the president speaking. They show congressional goings on, committee meetings, hearings, and such. They show all of that, so you hear what the people who actually believe the stuff, what our elected officials, how they feel. But there's no punditry. People can call in and voice their opinions, but C-SPAN itself, just here it is. We give it to you, and you absorb it and do with it what you will. So I recommend, if you're trying to find out what the hell just happened, who's talking about what, I think C-SPAN is a good way to go. As always, find your people. I'm probably going to an event tomorrow for the local Democrats. So I'll have that to report if I go in our next episode. But find those people that are like-minded. Gather in groups, because, as I've said before, you will feel better when you gather in groups. It will be a reminder that you are not the only one that feels this way. If you feel the same way I do, keep your powder dry and keep your quiet rage. Good night, my fellows.